right, we are going to go ahead and get started. We have a good number of RSVPs today, so we expect some more folks will trickle in while I'm doing this introduction, but want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is a really exciting workshop that's been a long time in the making, so we're thrilled to be able to share it with you. My name is Chris Neidl. I'm one of the co-founders of the OpenAir Collective. I'm currently based in the mountains of Costa Rica, which, knock on wood, hopefully my internet will fully hold up, so bear with me if there's a couple of little glitches. So let's go ahead and get right into it here. What we're going to be doing for today's workshop, and this really is a workshop and sort of a show and tell and recruitment, if you will, for some new missions that are launching out of OpenAir. And I'll explain what that term means if you're not already an OpenAir member shortly. And what today's agenda, again, we're going to be, here's the four missions that we will be talking about. We'll have presenters among our membership for each one of these short sort of overviews of what we're trying to achieve with them, which will give you a better sense of how you can actually participate. And that's really what we're doing here is we want, with all things OpenAir, more people to come in, jump in, and contribute. That's how it works here. And what we'll be doing for the next hour is the real core of it is going to be item 2 there that you can see is that the mission leads for each mission are going to give a very short 5-minute or less presentation on what they're working on, which will feature, ways in which you can, again, jump in and participate. And then we'll have a discussion about those missions, which will involve you. So we want folks in the audience to please use the Q&A panel. If you have ideas or thoughts on what's discussed or any questions, go ahead and add, and we'll fold that right into the discussion. But to get going first, I'm also going to give a little bit of a backgrounder to give you some context on OpenAir, what our purpose is, and how we're structured, which I think will set up nicely so you understand what we mean by missions and what we're trying to achieve and how it all works. And who you'll be hearing from, who I'm joined with on our side, is our great comms team here, who will be presenting. We have Tina, Rob, and Peter, all based in Northern California in the Bay Area. And then we have Tank, who gets the award for staying up late for the webinar. He's in Taiwan. And then Cade is joining us from Puerto Rico. And as I said, I'm based in Austin, but currently in Costa Rica. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And Tank is going to be our stage manager back. So you'll see some links that he'll be dropping as we go. And if you have any direct questions about things that you don't want to post in the chat, you can go ahead and ask Tank. All right. So as we go, I'm going to again start with this little backgrounder, which I think will set us up nicely for the mission overviews. And to start with that, for those of you who are not OpenAir members, we are a distributed action network focused on carbon dioxide removal advancement. We got started, myself and my co-founder, in New York City in 2019. And since that time, particularly over the last year, we've really grown. We're really on every continent where people live in great numbers and have a really, really active, dynamic membership, which hopefully you all can be a part of. And so what I want to do, though, first is why is it that OpenAir focuses on carbon dioxide removal? It's fair to say that everybody in our community is aligned with the broad goal of how we have to confront the climate crisis. There's many different things we do, but we took on the neighborhood of carbon dioxide removal for a very particular reason. And to explain why, first of all, I'm a guy who comes from, I spent my whole career in climate renewable energy, and I sort of watched this unfold, but as the climate crisis has become more severe and more forefronted in the public imagination and concern over the years since that first happened, it's really changed how we have to define our response to climate change. And obviously, when this first broke into the public imagination, we've known about the greenhouse effect since the 19th century, and scientists have been tracking this for many decades. But it was really in the 1990s where it became really a public and a policy priority. And at that time, it was all about how do we avoid excess emissions? And that was sort of the full scope of the solution. How do we stop putting more greenhouse gases up into the atmosphere? But as we all know, we have not been moving fast enough on that effort. And emissions have only continued to climb from our inaction. So as that has occurred, the nature of our response has also changed. And so that started with in the early 2000s, you started to hear more about adaptation, that we inevitably have climate effects that we're going to have to just live with, and we're going to have to sort of design and harden around. And that became part of the discourse and part of policy in the 2000s early. And then most recently is when carbon removal, again, which has been theorized and discussed at the margins for many decades, but really it's only been in the last handful of years that it's really been asserted as an important sort of third element of our climate response. And I put 2018 there because as somebody who saw this happen, that was really a time where I think it really broke, where a lot of people, a lot more discussion and interest in carbon removal happened. And it really traces back to one of the UN IPCC's, annual, always scary reports, global warming of 1.5C, where this was the first major report that really explicitly said that we're now in a position where the ship has already sailed. And in order to maintain a livable or 1.5C temperature change, we no longer cannot take carbon out of the air. And it also put forward an estimate for numbers of between 100 and 1,000 billion tons annually over the course of the 21st century. So that was sort of a moment where really the conversation around carbon removal went public. And so one of the key things, though, that is important, again, all of these things are all part of the same strategy, and carbon removal is the latest layer to it. And they're different from each other, though, in key ways in terms of what we have to do now. We have to do everything fast. We had to do everything yesterday. But with carbon removal in particular, because it's so new, we have to be very, very fast in every facet of making carbon removal a reality. Unlike with renewables, where the technologies for that are already quite mature and understood and already commercialized, we have to be ramping up research, development, innovation to identify what types of carbon removal are actually going to be most effective and most scalable. We have to do that now. Then, of course, we have to start doing deployment now and ramping that up over the next several decades and throughout the century. But underlying this, and this is absolutely pertinent to today's discussion, is that none of those things will happen unless there's broad public acceptance and understanding of what carbon removal is and isn't. And this, again, has been articulated by the UN IPCC that, yes, technically we have to figure out how to do this at scale, but that's not going to happen unless we identify socially acceptable ways of doing it and that the public is broadly on board now, well before 2050. And so who is going to do that? And that's the question that really occupies OpenAir. Who is or what is going to drive acceleration on all of these fronts? And of course, there is the formal carbon dioxide removal sector or ecosystem that is rapidly evolving. It's incredibly impressive to see. And by this, I mean all of the different CDR startups and companies that are happening, the many different researchers and academics and subject experts around the world, the various different entities, government, non-government, that want to buy or invest or support carbon dioxide removal, the many different forms of nonprofits and civil society organizations that can help build understanding and advocate. And certainly government has a massive role in terms of implementing policy. But what we believe at OpenAir, given the rate at which we have to do this, we can't follow the same playbook that we have with progress before in other areas. That's just not enough, we think, to accomplish the goal. So we need to involve everybody else and really tap what we think of as the general latent potential of the general public in playing a really meaningful role in accelerating things and getting us to where we have to. And that means volunteerism, and a type of volunteerism that is extremely active, where volunteers are contributing their time and expertise, their connections, and their will to do things that maybe those organizations within the formal ecosystem can't do by themselves. And that's what OpenAir is really based in, is how do we build networks of people that want to jump right in and make really meaningful contributions to accelerating and expanding carbon dioxide removal in partnership with the formal CDR ecosystem. And this is a quote that I love, that we flash around a lot within our community, that we believe that's kind of almost like a mission statement, is that large groups of connected small things can achieve almost anything if connected in the right way. So we look at OpenAir as a platform by which we can connect all kinds of different people to do amazing things around carbon dioxide removal. And what enables what we're doing, what everything really depends on, obviously, is what the internet enables. That you just saw all of the people who are tuning in today, as well as our team, even particularly since COVID, we're more connected and we have the ability to collaborate in ways that we never have before. And we want to use that to its fullest capacity. And in OpenAir, we embrace principles that are called peer production and open source. And peer production is an idea that volunteers in a crowd fashion can come together, often on a voluntary basis, and do things faster than the market can or formal organizations. And we're really committed to open source. So everything that we do, we want to make it completely transparent and share it, whether it's a piece of policy, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a design for a cool piece of technology. We think by making that open and available to all, that's only going to accelerate scale and innovation and improvement. And so the way OpenAir is structured, and you'll hear these two terms alluded to today, is that our community, which really exists on a Discord server, which we'll share the link to, which is a kind of like a Slack like platform where our community hangs out, as well as Zooms like this. We're structured according to domains, missions, and groups. And so just to describe what those are, domains are the broad areas of action or impact where our members focus their attention. And the way that we think about those today is advocacy. So that's advocating for policies or regulatory changes that will help speed up the deployment of carbon dioxide removal. That's research and development. We have a lot of folks within our community that are building cool objects and innovations or doing citizen science. And then communications, what today really focuses on is how do we talk about carbon removal in ways that are going to build public acceptance as fast and as broadly as possible. So just to give you some examples, we have many different missions. We have over 30 missions right now that our members, our volunteers are driving. But to give you just a couple of examples, we have an incredibly exciting bill in California that we've been driving, that we really were involved in the conception of, that right now we're trying to turn into a law. It's already passed in the Senate, and we're mobilizing to get that turned into a law between now and September. A really cool R&D project is a open source direct air capture device that we are going to build a new version of in our community every 2 months to try to see if we can accelerate and create excellent technology through a crowd model. And then many of you will be familiar on the comm side with This is CDR, which is our weekly, widely watched webinar series with CDR innovators and entrepreneurs that now just had its 70th episode. So that just gives you a flavor of specific examples of kinds of missions that we do in these three domains. And what's important to know is that these missions are really driven by, at its core, small groups of people. Often the broader community will be involved in certain twists and turns, but the driver's seat is really occupied by usually no more than 10 people. You know, usually 4 or 5 people are the folks that get on Zoom calls every week and push this forward. And so some critical communications needs that we've known for a really long time that we want to fill in and move forward with missions going forward include confronting misinformation about CDR on social media and elsewhere. As anybody who follows the space knows that while carbon dioxide removal is essential, there's a lot of dissension and disagreement within the environmental community and outside of the environmental community about what role. And that comes with a lot of kind of a low level of information, certainly in some important places, and a lot of misinformation and disinformation that's spread. And we need to confront that through our community. We also want to do everything we can to spread the word about what CDR is and isn't by penetrating every kind of network or different type of audience we can that we're close to help them understand carbon removal just as they understand climate change more broadly. We also want to focus on who are those influential actors out there in the public sphere that have big audiences, are well respected. How do we actually make direct contact with those types of people or those professions in some instances and try to convert them over to our side to be outspoken champions for carbon removal? And then this is such a fast moving space that how do we make sure that we can curate and moderate great, reliable, easy to read, accessible information about all facets of carbon dioxide removal and make that accessible to everybody who needs to have access to it? So these are 4 core needs, and what the missions that we'll be talking about today really correspond to each one of those needs. And so you're going to hear from the people that are really leading those at this stage. And a key thing to really stress is that while we've been planning these missions for a long time, we're at a stage right now where we're opening up the door for you all to come in and join and contribute. So this is both a promotion, but really a call to action to get folks to join to help us realize these missions as we move deeper into 2023. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it off to the mission leads for each of these missions. And in turn, we're going to go ahead and hear from each of them. So Tina, who's been an amazing member for probably going on 2 years right now, based in the Bay Area, is going to tell you a little bit about CDRreality. So Tina, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm Tina, and I joined the OpenAir Collective because I wanted to make a difference. And if you could go to the next slide, Chris, for me. And before I joined, I asked myself two really simple questions. Why me and why now? And the answers are just as simple as the questions. If not me, then who? And if not now, then when? What am I waiting for? And one of our members at the OpenAir Collective here, Dal Winters, put that really beautifully, that whole idea, that notion that I just tried to convey the other day. She said, every morning when I wake up, I think, what can I do to help the planet today? Not tomorrow, not next year, not when, I took my company public, I'm in Silicon Valley, so that's on my mind here, or when I'm retired, today. And there's another thought I want to share with you. Chris, could you go to the next slide? And that is the power of small changes. It's easy to kind of despair and think, oh my God, what can I do with my little contributions? But small contributions over a prolonged period of time add up to something big. So now let's talk about CDRreality. What we are doing with our mission here at CDRreality is what Chris alluded to. We confront mis and disinformation. And since I was a little confused about all of this in the beginning, let me just get the terminology straight. Misinformation is false information because people don't know any better. And disinformation is false information that people give out even though they know better, or in other words, bold-faced lies. So if you go to the next slide. What do we do? Our goal here at CDRreality is to confront that. And there are three elements to it. There is one, we need to actually know what the opponents are saying. We need to research that. And then we need to research how to counter it. And I want to state here that what's really important to us is that we are strictly fact-based. This is not about my opinions or my feelings or anybody's. This is about facts. So we research the facts and write that down and keep a repository to provide good and accurate information. The second part is going out there and finding where the wrong information is spread. And as you all, I'm sure, are aware, there's a lot of stuff being spread on social media that's just really crazy. And then the third step is to engage and set the record straight. And I'll give you a really quick example of how we did this once, I think quite successfully. So it was over a year ago, last March, when an organization called the Media Sanctuary had a webinar with a panel of people that we knew. They were the usual suspects. We knew they were very critical for all the wrong reasons of CDR. So we organized internally and we got a lot of our members to sign up. And then we organized some more and we thought about the arguments they would make. And we wrote down a list of questions and talking points and divvied them up between the members that were joining. And so they did the webinar and they talked and we just flooded the Q&A session. We provided counterpoints, we asked hard questions. And, it's maybe a little mean, but it was really fun to see in the end how the presenters started like really losing their cool and sweating and getting all nervous because we had such a number of good questions. No trolling, no name calling, no ad hominems, just facts. And did we change the mind of the panelists? Absolutely not. But I'm sure there were a lot of people there just listening in who hadn't made up their mind. And I'm sure we made an impression. We showed that there is another side to this coin. Okay, so now to the important part here. How can you get involved? So on the research side, I've already written up a lot, but this is a huge topic. It's always evolving. So anybody who likes to write, likes to do some research, and specifically people with a design talent, we need memes, we need infographics. It's a super easy way for somebody to get involved sort of behind the scenes. And then we have sort of the misinformation scouts. That's also kind of an easy thing to do and to get started. It could be as easy as following an opponent on social media or following an organization, just seeing what they do, what they talk about, what they put out. And then, as Chris likes to put it, put out the bat signal to the community saying, alert, alert, somebody is up to their usual nonsense again and, spreading misinformation. And then the third part is to then actually engage with those opponents in social media, provide those counterpoints, potentially even engage on a one-on-one, or write letters to the editors, comments to publication. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. And it can range from, you doing a full-time job or just spending an hour a week. So it's really flexible. And I hope that sounds interesting to you. And if it does, they'll contact me and we'll talk. And with that, I'm turning it over to Peter.
Thanks, Tina. And what I'm going to cover is the Communicator Network. And what we do here is to enable citizen educators to engage their networks to build awareness about CDR. And when I first started with OpenAir about a year ago, I didn't know much about CDR, but as I learned, I grew more and more excited about it and wanted to share it. And at the next, go to the next slide, Chris. What I realized is that, like everybody, I have a network. We all have networks, whether it's professional organizations, religious groups, service clubs, or book clubs, or even just your drinking buddies. We all have ways to reach out and to spread the word. Like probably a lot of you, I'm more of a generalist. I know, a lot about a lot of different topics, but not in that much depth. So, and I'm in a service club. I'm in a Rotary Club, and so that was one thing that engaged me. And so I got excited enough about CDR to develop a presentation and prepare it for my service club. So go to the next slide, Chris. So, like me, you probably a lot of us feel maybe we don't know enough. Maybe we're worried about whether we're good public speakers or whether we have enough time or what people will think of us. And I admit that I always face these kind of fears at the beginning, but OpenAir is a place where they have a lot of resources to allow you to overcome this and to make a difference and to spread the word out to your networks in a positive, proactive way. So in the next slide, Chris, there are currently the Communicator Network is serving as a resource for OpenAir members to get access to an open library of presentations, a collection of best practices, and also access to experts in CDR and in CDR communication. So what we're trying to do with the Communicator Network is to take what I did for my Rotary clubs, and take it up a notch and to spread it out to all of your networks and to make it so that we can have this, cascading, multiplying effect and get the word out so that we can build the broad awareness that Chris was talking about, that breadth, all of the rest of us can understand and appreciate CDR and learn about it and become advocates for it within our networks. So the next slide. What we'd like to do is to continue developing and making available sample presentations and sample best practices. So there are kind of two different types of content. One is kind of what is CDR and why does it matter, and the other is how to tell the story about climate and give sample best practices on that. And one thing there is that everybody has a climate story and a way that climate affects them personally. And when you reach out to your networks, that's something that really comes out is, why does this matter to you? And why are you advocating for something like CDR? And it's actually really fun and engaging. And I invite all of you to experience that. What we'd like to do next is to, Chris, next slide, is to open up a presentation library where we can have large numbers of presentations available either through downloads or to watch a video of somebody presenting that, so that you can enable yourself to do a similar presentation. And we'd like those to be sortable by subject, by audience, by mission, and soon by language. So all of that is kind of visionary. And boy, do we need help to get all of that realized. And so the next slide is how you can help. Is first of all, start reaching out to your networks, see where you might be able to contribute, start putting together presentations, and then when you have one, share your presentation. You can curate content. You can also coach others to develop similar content. And what OpenAir provides is a forum for you to do this, not by yourself, but with support from a number of experts. And we are really fortunate to have OpenAir resources available. And I invite you to join the Communicator Network and take it out to your networks. Thanks. And next, we're going to hear from Rob on some of the interesting ways we can get to influencers.
Thank you, Peter, and greetings, everyone. So my situation is somewhat similar to Peter's. I joined OpenAir Collective about a year ago, and when I joined, CDR was a fairly foreign concept to me. And this is an environment with OpenAir Collective where there's a lot of collaboration, like-minded, very good people. It just fosters a lot of creativity and learning. So it's been a great journey for me. And I look back a year ago and how much I've evolved since then. And I'm actually thrilled with what I now know and the people I've met, and look forward to more of that in the future. For me, a mission that became very near and dear to me was about looking at people who are very influential in both a good way and maybe not so good a way, as far as what they could do for climate change, and more specifically with CDR. And so with this mission at a very high level, it's really focused on identifying people who have a large following in traditional or social media, who are in a position really to help shape public opinion and policies and key decisions about CDR. If we can go to the next slide. And with that, we're really looking first and foremost at identifying who are these people. And in doing some research through Google Alerts and other means, we quickly found that they span many different professions. We're talking about scientists and engineers, educators. Sometimes they live in all three of those areas. Meteorologists and climate reporters, they've got a very large following and they're very well equipped to talk about climate change and climate change solutions. There are journalists and authors. Some of them aren't necessarily specialists in any field, but others are really focused more on the environment. We've got TV personalities and celebrities. An example would be somebody like Bill Nye, who could be a really great resource in advocating about CDR. Climate activists, we've got doctors who have gotten more and more engaged in climate change just because of all the health aspects involved with climate change and pollution. Economists more and more are coming on board because of the economic impacts of climate change. And then finally, political figures. And by that, I don't just mean elected officials, but people who work in the field of politics who are influential, such as lobbyists. So these are typically the kinds of professions where we're seeing a lot of active communication or social media posts about climate change, and they can be in a really key position to help shape the conversation about CDR. We go to the next slide. When we look at the channels where these people have the most influence, there are the more common mainstream channels, such as traditional TV news and talk shows, or print media, newsletters that can come directly from these people, or it can be third-party sources that they plug into, podcasts and webcasts, books, and so on. These are more traditional state approaches, and they have a lot of influence, and it's really important to follow what's being communicated through these channels, The limitation with these channels is typically it's very difficult to engage directly and in real time with people, but they're still very important channels. And there are ways, of course, of working around this. If you're talking about a webcast, ideally, if people are attending when it's live and they can chat and comment about it, then chances are they can interact more directly with the expert speaker. But it's really in social media where we see much higher levels of engagement. This is much more dynamic. And what we find is Twitter tends to be the channel most often used, most widely used by these influencers. So that's really a key platform. LinkedIn, I would say, is a distant second. There are some that use LinkedIn more than Twitter, or they use it instead of Twitter. So it plays a really key role. TikTok is an interesting one because the reach is phenomenal. It's been growing in popularity, but it's still too early to say that this is really a great platform for us to engage with. And I think over time, it may become more and more prevalent. And then Mastodon is another one that's really interesting, where we see some people migrating from Twitter to Mastodon. So we're keeping a close watch, but I wouldn't say we're really at critical mass to be able to engage very effectively at scale on Mastodon. So it's fairly dynamic in the social media front, but a lot of opportunities to engage there. Before I go to my very last slide, which is asking for your help, I just wanted to share my own personal journey with this. The field is so broad in terms of the different professions and people involved in communicating about climate change and CDR, or potentially who could be communicating about it, that it's very difficult to try to keep track of everyone who we would consider to be influential. And typically by influential, we're talking about people who have a minimum audience following of about 100,000 or more. Many of them have millions of followers, somebody like Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson. So for me personally, I got involved with meteorologists and with climate reporters. And with meteorologists, many of them weren't talking about climate change. So my focus is really on how can I convince more and more national broadcast meteorologists and local meteorologists to talk regularly about climate change and climate change solutions. And I've been working on this for several months now, but I'm really excited because I'm starting to engage with people at a national level and also at a more local level, and starting to get them to think about how they can communicate about not just climate change, but CDR solutions. And one recent example, I'm working with somebody who used to be a meteorologist at Good Morning America, and now he's broadcasting at a local television station in the San Francisco area. And he's really interested in helping out with this. And I did pair him off with the CEO of an organization that's involved with forestation and afforestation, and the two of them are going to work together on a webcast. So I think this could be the beginning of many more of these kinds of engagements where we can get climate reporters and meteorologists to talk specifically about CDR. We go to the last slide. As far as how you can help, would love to have you join us and work in any one of these missions. But for mine, at the very end, you'll see contact information where you can get a hold of us if you want to learn more or let us know that you're interested in volunteering. And with this field, because it's so broad, so many different professions, I think as a starting point after contacting us, it's really determining what professions and people you'd like to engage with. And it doesn't have to be in a field where you're expert. It could be in a field where you feel passionate about it or you'd like to learn more. So for meteorologists, that's not a field that I know a lot about. But in the last few months, I've been riding a very steep learning curve, and I'm learning a lot more about their profession, how they communicate, how to engage with them, and what resources are of value to them. So it's been a great journey for me. So I'd say identifying the professions and professionals you want to engage with is a good starting point. And then starting to engage with them, follow them and engage with them on their preferred channels, Twitter or whatever media they use. And then finally looking for opportunities to support, amplify, reinforce their message. They're always appreciative when you do. And if you can share content with them that can help reinforce their message, that's helpful too. And if sometimes you find maybe somebody's heading down a path that you don't necessarily agree with, it's an opportunity to respectfully engage with them and say, you know, here's my point of view, and here's some content that we think would be helpful. So it's really an opportunity to amplify messages that we think are helpful to CDR, as well as to try to get people to course correct if we're not quite aligned with their messages. So we'd love to have you join. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kate, who's going to talk about our CDRwiki.
Thank you, Rob. My name's Cade, and I've been with OpenAir about 6 months, and I'm a retired chemical engineer. I've been interested in climate change mitigation for about the last 10 years, but I didn't know anything about CDR. So I had a lot to learn when I came aboard here at OpenAir. By the way, I'm looking at that slide. That is not the Wikipedia W. Just thought I'd mention that. It's just to evoke the wiki idea. I thought a wiki would be a good idea for carbon dioxide removal. And so I suggested it. And then I found out that that means I volunteered. I began by collecting topics and keywords and making the simple definitions. But it turns out we need more than that. We need this grander objective of extensive information. So next slide, please, Chris. So we have information overload. There's a huge amount of information, and we need to be able to access that information quickly and build institutional knowledge within OpenAir so that everybody knows what are the vetted sources and where they can go for good information. Next slide. And the field is changing. Carbon dioxide removal is growing, and we need to expand our knowledge. And the approaches to CDR are growing variants. So we now are trying to catalog those within the wiki. We also are collecting exemplar projects, key studies, any other efforts that seem highly relevant, like key conferences that might talk about CDR, particular university programs. Every university has a program, but some of them are key programs. Next slide. So a searchable repository is vital to our work. We also want to document missteps, and we want to document hard lessons so that people don't have to reinvent the wheel. For example, biomass handling used to be always wood, but now other kinds of biomass are being handled, and sometimes there's some tricks to that, and we want to be able to share that information as people learn the difficulties. OpenAir has developed a lot of information, as other people have mentioned, and we want to be able to link all that to keywords that are built into the wiki. So next slide. Where is that wiki? There's the link on the page. And by the way, that www in front is critical. Don't just type openairforum.org or you won't get there. Please check it out. And I would love some feedback if it's useful. Consider volunteering some time. Next slide. This is where we aspire to be. These are the things I talked about. We have a topic summary, and then the variants and notable projects. And the additional information can be a quite large section. Everything in the wiki is subject to rewriting too. So there's a lot. So the topics, I've written some of them, but I'm sure somebody else could write it better. So we need help with that. And of course, it all needs to be kept up to date, and it's constantly changing. So next slide. There are thousands of big and small pieces. Writing an article or finding somebody to write an article, that is great. But even finding a bad link is helpful. We need to add new links. We need to generate new topic stubs. So if you see something missing or you don't see it, it's missing, we need to add a stub so that we can fill it in. We need to build out the framework of this wiki. And you can learn a lot just from thinking about what should be in the wiki, how it should be linked. Like biochar and biomass energy with carbon capture and storage. Those sound completely different, but if you start thinking about it, you find out that they are quite similar. So think about that. We're building infrastructure here, and you can help with paving some of these paths, making the connections that we all need to understand this topic. I'm available on Discord. My name is Cade, and there's a wiki channel in our Discord chat. So it's simple as that. Come help with the wiki. So back to you, Chris.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. That was very concise and clear, and hopefully everybody has a much clearer understanding of the specifics and has a real clear understanding that we're not just sharing this to show our work. We're sharing the beginning of 4 separate journeys here that we want your help on. And hopefully one thing that became clear is that there's a variety of different ways to contribute, that depending on your availability, your interests, or whatever, you can make that choice, whether it's as simple as retweeting something or writing a wiki article or making a presentation or many things in between. So hopefully that was clear to you that there's many ways to do that. So a couple things in terms of next steps is Tank, I'm sure you've shared it already. I can't see the chat right now, but what we've done is this is being recorded, and you'll also get this link once I edit and share the video with everybody RSVP'd and attended. But we're going to, we have a Google form there with just a few short questions that allow you, if you're interested in finding out more or joining any one of these missions, fill out that form. It allows you to indicate which missions are most interesting to you and which ones, even if you don't know yet, you can say that, and then we'll be in touch. Next week, and probably for the next couple of Wednesdays, we're going to have a general kind of orientation where we're going to talk about these in a little bit more depth about where these missions are, what we're immediately working on, and then you can indicate your ideas and where you want to plug in. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, it really all revolves around smallish core groups that really, really want to drive this. And so if you come to the orientation next week or a following one, you can find out a lot more and tell us a little bit more about yourself. If you can't make it, if this time doesn't work, don't worry about it. We'll reach out to you otherwise. You can indicate that in the form in the little comment and question part, and we'll be in touch. We want to meet you wherever you are in terms of your schedule and interest. So, Tank, I'm sure you've dropped that in there, but drop it liberally. And folks, please do fill out that form. Even if you're just curious, don't worry, you're not signing your life away. This is just a way for you to take the next step and to find out more. And this here will probably share, fill out the form. You don't need to take this information down. We'll be in touch with you. So what I want to be able to do right now, excellent presentations, everyone. We do have a couple of questions that have come in as well. If all of the members of the team here want to turn on their videos and their audio, we can have a bit of a conversation as well as hear from the people who've showed up today. And one thing I think that would be a great question to kick off with, if each of you could talk about, is let's pretend we're a year from now, right now. What would success in very simple, concise terms look like for each of you who are initiating these missions? Where do you want to be a year from now? What would it look like to be successful? And let's go ahead and start in order. And Tina, if you have any thoughts to share on that.
Oh, I can paint a really grand vision here, but to be realistic, a year from now, I'd like to have a dedicated group of people who follow the misinformation that's going on and engage. This is really a crowdsourcing effort. It's hard to do with just few, but even with a little bit of engagement from many, many people, we can really successfully just reach out and engage and counter this disinformation that's already out there. And then another thing is, I would really like to see our repository of information to be much larger. And I forgot to mention earlier, so I'm saying it now. I'm hopeless when it comes to graphic design, but there is so much value in good graphics. So I'd love to have memes and infographics. So anybody out there with any talent in that area, I'd love to see you be part of the team a year from now, having created tons of really cool shareable visuals. So that's my vision.
Great. How about you, Peter?
I think a year from now, OpenAir should become the go-to place to go get information and have access to resources. So we'll be sought after by whether it's teachers, college professors, ministers and all kinds of people from a variety of professions will be coming to get easy access to resources that can help them spread the word in their networks.
Excellent. Great. And Rob?
In a year from now, I'd love to see fellow volunteers engaged with influencers across the different professions we were talking about, whether scientists or meteorologists, journalists, and so on. And it's rather lofty, but for those who have really high reach, somebody like a Neil deGrasse Tyson in science, somebody like Ezra Klein in journalism, all the different fields, it would be nice if we could at least, for every single field, have a really major influencer where we've got engagement with them.
Excellent. And Cade?
For me, it's really simple. I'd just like to see a year from now people clamoring to edit the wiki entries. That would be the dream.
Wikis really require a lot of people to be effective wikis, for sure. Absolutely. So we do have some great questions here, which I'll get to, a couple two that I would love to bring up. But before I do that, Tank, who has been managing backstage, is the most recent member of our team. And Tank, I'm wondering, you have a valuable insight to offer because you just jumped in with both feet really less than a month ago and are already contributing. And I wonder if you could give us a little bit of impressions to people who might be thinking about what is this like to participate? Is there any kind of experiences that you could share, sort of about your early stages of being an OpenAir member on the comms team?
All right. Hi, everyone. Tank here. I've joined probably 3 weeks ago. Yeah, and I'm already on this webinar, and I feel that the one thing that impressed me the most is how open and how welcome the CDR community is, especially here in OpenAir as well. And so being able to get in and get involved right away, it is great. There's no hurdles, and it's very encouraging. And seeing all these people working on this already and pushing for CDR is inspiring. Yeah.
Excellent. It's great to have you, Tank. Really been awesome. Jump right in. Well, let me just answer some of these really straightforward questions in the Q&A. I'll start with Peter's. Great question, Peter. Peter, when I edit this video early pre-dawn tomorrow and then send it out to all RSVPs, I'm going to include not only a link to the YouTube video as well as a link to the form that allows you to sign up to what you're interested in. I'll also share the actual text of the chat here. So don't worry about it scrambling to get everything. So I'll go ahead and you'll get all that as a nice package tomorrow. Another question from an anonymous attendee is, can you volunteer to the wiki if you work for a for-profit in the CDR sector? Absolutely. Totally. That's where a lot of the expertise lies. Obviously, we're not doing, commercials for particular pathways or particular companies, but in OpenAir, we have all kinds of people, including really incredible representation from some of the leading innovators in the CDR private sector. So you can absolutely jump right in, contribute what you know. Everybody is welcome as long as we're all on the same page with the same mission. Good question from Sebastian, where he says, how can we position ourselves if someone, the fact that the United Nations doesn't support CDR as a climate solution? The United Nations is a big, complicated thing. The United Nations, in fact, the IPCC is the most important source of information validating our claims here. If you look at the AR6 reports and the information, they're the ones who are telling us, hey, we got to do this. Within that, though, there are some dissenting voices that are sort of a bit more ambivalent about it. That's our target. These are targets that we actually want to influence across all four of the things that we just talked about. So the United Nations, particularly as we get into the next COP28 in Dubai, there will probably be some mission activity related to focusing on the UN. So that's a great question. And then here's Haley, excellent question. Any thoughts on engaging with environmental conservation organizations in CDR? We do that all of the time. Anybody, as Tina could tell you, and anybody here who spends time in the CDR world realizes that a lot of the greatest amount of pushback that we see on CDR, misunderstandings about it, actually come within the climate movement and the environmental movement. So engaging with those actors, with CDReality, with the communicator network, with influencers, and providing great information that's accessible is a key way to converting those organizations and understanding their concerns and educating them. So that's a really good question. So those are our audience questions. And just a couple ones here for the team in our remaining time. This has been great. is that, one of the things that kind of you can see here, we're all volunteers. I come from a renewables background and stuff like that, but some of the most amazing participants in OpenAir are people who are brand new to climate, brand new to activism, and they bring what they have. And so I don't know if you guys want to sort of speak to this a little bit, but I think that there's a real asset to not being the expert talking to people who you're trying to convince. Being someone who's talking to your peers who you trust is, I think, in some ways more important than expertise. That's the more kind of convincing voices. But I don't know if any of the members of the team want to sort of weigh in on that point.
Well, one thing I'd like to say that's kind of related to that. I first started seeing this idea of carbon footprint, and I started trying to figure out what is my carbon footprint for some things. And I decided that although it works good for an urban area where there's lots of people kind of doing the same thing, sometimes it didn't make sense. And so I think I did my own numbers. And I think that's something that I also find really interesting about carbon dioxide removal, is that I want to really understand what's going on. And so I just started picking it apart and getting involved and learning as much as I could. And I think if you're curious about what's going on in the world, this is a great place to be. So.
Another thing I'd like to add here is that CDR is really still new. I mean, there has so much happened in the year and a half since I joined, when there was hardly any information out there. Now there's more, but it's still very new. So a lot of people, when you say carbon dioxide removal, they have not the first idea what you're talking about. And so I think there's great opportunities just to engage on that. Hey, I'm just a mother, and I want my 18-year-old to have a life and to have a livable planet when he is my age. So I think this whole peer-to-peer, just two people talking to each other is a very good way of socializing CDR and just raising awareness of it.
Yeah, I just too that when I first ventured into this, I was rather intimidated because this was very new to me, and then I found myself interacting with people who are experts in different aspects of this, and I'm much more comfortable with it now because I see my role as somebody who can learn and share information, maybe with those who don't know as much. But I'm also a bit of a matchmaker too, because often I can find subject matter experts and get them paired off with other people who may be able to help them in other ways, and so that matchmaking role I think can be very powerful.
Absolutely.
I was just going to add that there's so much to learn that it never ends. It's just you come in and you think you think you're learning something, but it's pretty clear that the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. But what I will say is that the more I've gotten into this whole topic of CDR, it's not just about the technology; it's also about the morality of fixing the problems that we've created, and that ends up occupying almost as much of my thought as the technology itself.
Excellent. And one thing I want to say, just in our remaining time, again, just with the call to action here, and Tank, if you want to go ahead and drop it one more time, please do. If you're interested, fill out the form. We'll be in touch. This really depends on participation of existing and new members. But just in the last couple of minutes, just to put this in a real world context, I mentioned the bill SB 308, or the Carbon Dioxide Removal Market Development Act, which is a bill that OpenAir got introduced in California. It is the most ambitious carbon dioxide removal support bill ever introduced anywhere in the world. And we've already passed it through one of the houses in California. It's massively important that we keep pushing on this. And if we got to pass this, it'd be a defining moment for the sector globally. And just to think about it, I wonder if the team here, you all are familiar with it, you're all familiar with our campaign, but can you just sort of mention, how is it that each of our missions might be able to interact with that advocacy mission? How could the different things that we're trying to do here actually plug in and make that campaign more effective? And maybe just Tina, to sort of start with you.
Yeah, I mean, the same principle applies here than everywhere else. There is misinformation and disinformation out there. We have seen opposition to the bill, and we need to counter it. We need to be prepared to go out there with our good arguments and support this bill.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for people doing testimony or providing testimonials at the hearings, for example, getting them prepared for the presentations is something that I think we're definitely able to help with some of the resources that we're putting together with the Communicator Network.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Peter, I mean, we do citizen lobbying meetings with legislators that we're setting up right now. Those involve 10-minute presentations, you know what I mean? So as the Communicator Network, making presentations that are specifically focused on legislators is a key part of our toolkit. And Rob, I would say too, you know, if we could get, people were suggesting, could we get Schwarzenegger? Could we get other notable Californians, you know, potentially to say, yes, we support the bill? You know, you could absolutely see the importance of influencers applied to the SB 308 campaign. So great. Well, with this, we have a couple minutes left, but we can end late. This was really excellent. I hope that you picked up, you know, it's been months in the planning organically, going back all the way to last summer that some of these ideas happened, and now it's really, really go time. So don't be shy. Jump right in. As Tank just said, the OpenAir way is you come in and suddenly, whoa, I'm on a webinar. I'm a member of a team. That's the way we work here. So please do consider taking part in this and contributing to the success of these missions, because I do think what we're proposing here for missions fill in a big gap that we have at OpenAir. This part is kind of an underlying function of OpenAir of changing minds, persuading, elevating what's correct, and countering what's incorrect. It feeds into every other thing that we do. So this is in some ways the most important kind of heart of what it means to be an OpenAir member. So I hope folks can join. Ann joined. They say, hey, Ann, you'll get to meet people like Ann Pasek, who's a climate communicator, who's advised us a lot, as well as others. I'm so happy you got to join. I see you in the chat. Mike, you had a great example about Adam McKay. I think we're going to pick you up on that and see if we can get him to be a champion for CDR. So great ideas already. And hopefully we'll see some of you next Wednesday, or we'll see you on the forum, and we'll be in touch. And with that, we can call it a day. Everybody enjoy a weekend. So thank you folks for joining.